Hello again, welcome to another edition of Precision Ag Perspectives. Paul Schrempf here, and joined by a very special guest this time. This is Jess Lowenberg-DeBoer. He's with Harper University in the UK. He's going to bring a little bit of a global perspective to us and share some of the things he's been working on. Welcome, Jess.
Good to be with you.
And I know so you took a position not long ago over on the other side of the pond here. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what you're working on?
So I'm at Harper University, which is if you want to study or do research on applied agriculture in the UK, it's really the place to be. It's a very agriculturally focused place, about 5,000 students, only agriculture. So there's nothing else besides agriculture. So if you compare that to U.S. ag schools, it's a small university, but a big ag school. My position is I'm the Elizabeth Creek Professor of Agritech Economics. And I focus mostly on agricultural economics research related to agricultural technology. I occasionally lecture classes. I advise some graduate students, but it really is an opportunity for me to get back to focusing what I really like to do, and that's research.
Terrific. So, what are some of the things that are really interesting that are happening that you're dealing with in Great Britain and perhaps Europe overall in terms of technology?
Well, I'll mention three things, and one of them is crop robotics. A second one is targeted weed control using weed recognition, and then overall, I have a long-term interest in trying to understand precision ag adoption patterns, and I continue to be involved there. For the crop robotics, Harper Adams is a really great place to be because around the world, lots of people are trying to figure out the profitability and the economics of crop robotics, but there's very little data available. So there's some great things going on in companies, but it tends to be proprietary, and the information doesn't get out very much. In most universities and public research institutions, they have some prototypes, but they don't really have functioning systems. Harper Adams has been running what's called hands-free hectare for the last 2 years. So they actually have some experience in growing crops entirely with robotic equipment. This year, we've gotten some new funding, and we're starting hands-free farm. So this means not just one field being farmed with robots. It means a whole farm, and you got all the logistics and other issues that are created when you ramp up the scale.
Interesting. A lot of the discussion when I was at the San Francisco World Agritech Innovation was the difficulty of bringing robotics to scale and making sure that you had something that was actually going to work on not just one farm, but a number of farms. It could be replicated in different environments and different crops. And what at Harper Adams, is that something that you're looking at, is how to really make this thing scale when you look at the hands-free farm?
Absolutely. And so at Harper, we think that while a lot of the work in robotics has been focused on horticulture and high value crops, with good reason, because there's a real shortage of labor there, high value. But we kind of think that maybe robotics in grains and oilseeds may be the low-hanging fruit, because we already know how to mechanize grain and oilseed. We don't have to create that technology. We just have to automate it. And what hands-free hectare has shown is we can automate that very effectively and quite cheaply. So we just completed an analysis using the whole hands-free hectare model of what would a UK grain farm look like if it were done robotically, retrofitting conventional equipment. And some really interesting things come out of that. One of them is that you lower the cost of production all across the board for all farm sizes by about 20 pounds per ton, which so 25 US dollars per ton or so, which gets UK costs of production down into the range of a lot of the major wheat exporters in the world. And that's a wheat production cost. Secondly, it really can reduce the amount of capital required to farm. So that by our estimate, you can, cut the capital cost investment required for grain farming by half or more by going robotically, because you're using small equipment very intensively. So where a lot of conventional grain farms, they may work 12, 14 hours a day, but with a robot, you can work, aside from maintenance time, you can work 24 hours a day. And thirdly, that which is of great interest in the UK and in Europe in general, that with robotics, once you take the human beings off of equipment, then you can use smaller equipment. And the fact that there's lots of small, irregularly shaped fields in Europe doesn't matter quite as much, because with the small robots, they can handle that quite effectively.
Interesting. Do you think some of this technology can be applied to some of the larger fields when you're looking at Brazil and the United States and Eastern Europe, places that have large, really have the row crops that have extremely large fields? Can it translate to that? Is it different sizes of equipment or just more of the same, or do you have a view on that?
From the analysis that we've done, I think there really will be two different paths toward automation of agriculture. One of them will be in places like Europe, in the eastern United States, say Pennsylvania, upstate New York, places like that, Japan, much of China. You will get small swarm robotics, essentially. Many small robots doing the work that maybe in the past was done by a single large machine. In the places where mechanized agriculture was very successful, U.S. Midwest, Canadian prairies, Brazilian cerrados, what you're more likely to get, at least in the next couple of decades, is an automated large-scale agriculture where you still will have human operators on some of the equipment, just fewer of them, and some of the smart grain cart technology that's starting to be commercialized in the U.S. is one of the forerunners of that. So there's still a human driver running the combine. It's just that the grain cart is now automated and doesn't always have a human being on it.
Interesting. Well, let's cover a little bit about weed control. You talked about that as an initiative that you're working on. What should everyone know about some of the things that you're doing and finding success with when it comes to weed control?
Well, okay, and I'll advise you, we're just at the beginning of this particular. We're not quite as far along as with some of the robotic economics issues, but it looks like there's technology out there that much more effectively will identify weeds and allow targeting them with either targeted doses of pesticides or with alternatives. There's one of my colleagues here at Harper is working on a laser that you would identify a weed and shoot it with a laser, and okay, that will do it. Whatever the weed killing technology is, this will then substantially reduce the amount of pesticide used in terms of quantity, but may open a big opportunity for some of those businesses that are now supplying chemicals to supplying services, because farmers may not want to own some of this targeted weed control equipment, especially at first, where the technical change is very rapid, and they don't want to be stuck owning a piece of equipment that, after a year becomes obsolete because the new technology has come along. And a particular issue here in the UK is something called blackgrass, which is a particular problem in winter cereals. So winter wheat, which is the most common grain crop in the UK, very difficult to control. Basically, the alternative, which many farmers are being forced to adopt, is to go to spring cereals, which are much less productive in a UK environment. And they're looking now at some of this targeted weed control as a way to be able to keep growing winter cereals, but keep that weed problem under control.
Well, that's really interesting, Jess. I know you're going to be doing a lot of travel coming up in the next as you always have. You've been a long time international traveler. And I understand that you're trying to get a handle on adoption patterns, and have done some papers recently and some work on where we are with technology adoption in different places around the world. Can you share a few insights on some of the things that you learned and hope to learn in the next year or so?
Yeah, so the paper that we just published in Agronomy Journal was really driven by this comment that I hear all over the place. And people say, oh, precision agriculture adoption is really slow, and why aren't farmers grabbing it, and so on. And so a colleague and I decided, okay, we'd take a look at the data. And the data is really clear. Not complete, but what's there is clear, is that auto steer, GPS guidance, sprayer boom control, planter shutoffs, all those kinds of guidance and application type technologies are being adopted everywhere where there's mechanized agriculture, absolutely everywhere. And I think the comment comes from mostly the reluctance of farmers to adopt variable rate technology, particularly fertilizer, which was among the first of the precision ag technologies. It's very hard to find a place around the world where variable rate fertilizer is more than 15–20% of either farmers or acreage. But there are a few places where it greatly exceeds that, which are sort of the exceptions that prove the rule. That I interpret that relatively modest variable rate adoption to be a case where farmers are really interested in the technology, but they're not convinced that it's profitable. But there's a few places where it's clearly profitable and farmers have jumped on it. And my favorite example is nitrogen on sugar beets in the Red River Valley of the North in Minnesota and North Dakota, where some very careful surveys have shown adoption of well over 50% of variable rate nitrogen, because if you put too much nitrogen on sugar beets, you get big sugar beets with low sugar content, and processors hate that. So they offer a premium on sugar content. Farmers have a motivation to get high sugar content beets. The local consultants geared up to do the soil testing and so on. University of Minnesota and North Dakota State did the research that showed what the optimal level of nitrogen was. And so all the puzzle pieces came together and you had high adoption. We don't find that in very many other parts of the world.
It's very difficult, that I was writing something recently on almost the need to decommoditize a lot of agriculture, because we've gotten to the point where we can produce this stuff pretty readily, even under very stressful conditions. It seems to have evened out farming overall, and until you find something that either makes a difference in the crop or delivers some extra value, it does make it difficult to forward technology that improves things.
Well, and this is one of the hopeful signs that with the combination of robotic technology, targeted weed control, marketing through the internet and electronically, the ability of farmers to serve more specialized markets is that becomes much more feasible now than it was in the past. And so, particularly again here in the UK, DEFRA, which is their Ministry of Agriculture, is really looking at this as an opportunity for agricultural entrepreneurship.
Interesting. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. I want to say thank you, Jess, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. And as you can tell, it's a subject I really like to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you joining us, and that's all we have time for today at Precision Ag Perspectives. We'll see you next time.